Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are tackling something that I think, well, we all deal with it constantly. If you walk into any doctor's office, or, frankly, if you just scroll through any wellness feed on your phone, there is this singular, undisputed villain.
Absolutely, the invisible killer.
Right. We're told it shreds our arteries, it shrinks our hippocampus, it stores fat specifically in our midsection, and essentially it just ages us at a cellular level. I am talking, of course, about stress.
Public enemy number one.
Yeah.
And the prescription is, it's always the exact same thing. Eliminate it.
Yeah.
If you have a high-stress job, quit. If you have a chaotic life, simplify it. We treat stress as this toxic radiation that we just have to shield ourselves from at all costs.
We really do. And I mean, I'll be honest, I completely subscribe to that. When I have a week where I'm maybe not sleeping well and the deadlines are just piling up, I can physically feel the damage happening.
Yeah.
So when I picked up Dr. Kelly McGonigal's work, the source we're looking at today, The Upside of Stress, I was totally ready to read just another guide on how to calm down.
Right.
But that is not what this is it?
Not at all.
Yeah.
And this is where we really have to ask you, the listener, to suspend your disbelief for a minute. Because McGonigal isn't just saying, look on the bright side.
Yeah.
She is a highly respected health psychologist who spent years, literally her whole early career, demonizing stress until she ran into a specific set of data that essentially dismantled everything she thought she knew.
Okay, so let's dive into that data, because our mission today is to essentially dismantle this toxic narrative around stress, right? And replace it with something much more useful. So this study, the one that changed her mind, it was of 30,000 adults. Let's stay here for a moment because the scale of this really matters.
It matters a lot.
This wasn't some survey of 50 undergrads in a psychology class. This was a massive public health tracking project.
Exactly. It was conducted by the National Center for Health Statistics. They tracked these 30,000 adults over the course of 8 years. And they asked all the standard health questions, lifestyle, diet, smoking habits.
Right.
But they also asked two really crucial questions, specifically about stress. Number one, how much stress did you experience in the last year? And number two, do you believe that stress is harmful to your health?
Okay, so they're tracking the actual amount of stress and the mindset about the stress as two completely separate variables.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And then they waited to see who died.
Wow.
Yeah, they literally combed through public death records for the next 8 years to track the mortality of those 30,000 people.
And I assume, the people with the high stress died at a higher rate, right? That just seems like basic biology to me.
Well, yes and no. And this is the nuance that just changed everything for Dr. McGonigal. People who reported high levels of stress did have a 43% increased risk of dying.
See?
I knew it.
Case closed. Stress kills. We can end the deep dive right here.
Hold on. Because that 43% increase only applied to the people who also believed that stress was harmful to their health.
Wait, so if you had high stress but you didn't believe it was killing you, what happened to your risk?
It vanished.
Completely.
Completely. People with high stress who did not view stress as harmful had the lowest risk of death of anyone in the entire study.
That is
even lower than the people who reported having very little stress.
That is absolutely baffling. You're telling me that someone with a high-pressure job, kids screaming at home, mortgage worries, if they just think to themselves, hey, this isn't hurting me, they're statistically safer than someone living a completely zen, stress-free life.
Statistically, yes. The researchers concluded that it wasn't the stress itself that was killing people. It was the combination of the stress and the belief that stress is harmful.
Wow.
In fact, they estimated that over the 8 years of the study, 182,000 Americans died prematurely, not from stress, but from the belief that stress is bad for them.
182,000 people?
Yeah. If you do the math on that, it would make believing stress is bad for you the 15th leading cause of death in the United States.
That's insane.
That is more than skin cancer, HIV/AIDS, and homicide combined.
That is a staggering statistic. It implies that the public health message we've all been hearing for decades, that stress kills, is actually a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right.
We're being warned about a danger, and the warning itself is what's creating the danger.
Exactly. And that right there is the core mission to this deep dive.
Yeah.
We aren't trying to pretend that stress feels good. No one likes being overwhelmed.
Right, obviously.
But Dr. McGonigal's work is about dismantling the stress is toxic narrative, because that narrative itself is essentially a biological weapon we're using against ourselves. We need to replace it with what she calls a stresses-enhancing mindset.
Okay. Stress is enhancing. I'll admit, I'm a little skeptical, but I am listening. If we are going to pivot our entire mindset, we probably need to fundamentally change our definition of what stress actually is first.
We do.
Because right now, for me at least, stress is just this bucket where I throw literally everything from a bad traffic jam to a divorce.
Right. We do use it as a catch-all term for just things I don't want to deal with today. But McGonigal offers a reframe that I find incredibly grounding.
Mm.
She defines stress simply as this: what arises when something you care about is at stake.
What arises when something you care about is at stake?
Yeah. Think about that for a second. Can you have a meaningful life without stress?
I mean, probably not.
Well-
If I want to build a career, that's stressful. If I want to have a family, that is incredibly stressful. Even my hobbies, if I decide I want to run a marathon, that is immense physical and mental stress on the body.
Exactly. The only way to have a life with absolutely zero stress is to care about absolutely nothing. If you don't care about your job, your relationships, your health, or the world, you won't feel stress. But you also won't feel any meaning.
So the stress is actually kind of a proof of life. It's a signal that I'm engaged with something that matters to me.
Right. It's what psychologists call the paradox of stress. High levels of stress often correlate with a really high sense of purpose and love in a person's life.
That makes a lot of sense.
If you make your primary goal stress reduction, you often inadvertently strip away the very things that give your life meaning. You quit the challenging job, you avoid the difficult conversation, you don't take the risk. And you end up comfortable, perhaps, but totally empty.
That's a really powerful distinction. Stress isn't a malfunction in the system, it's a byproduct of meaning. But let's get a bit more specific about this mindset stuff, because it sounds a little bit like The Secret or just positive thinking. Is there actual scientific rigor behind this?
There is immense rigor behind it. This comes largely from the lab of Alia Crum at Stanford University. She developed a tool called the Stress Mindset Measure.
Okay, what does that look like? Is it like a questionnaire?
It is. It asks people to rate how much they agree with certain statements. So on one end, you have statements like, stress depletes my health and vitality. And on the other end, stress enhances my performance and productivity.
I'm going to guess 90% of people agree with the first one.
You'd be right. The vast majority of people hold what Crum calls the stress is harmful mindset. They view stress as a toxin to be avoided. When these people feel their heart racing, they think, I'm failing or I'm getting sick. They focus entirely on the damage.
And the other group?
The stress is enhancing group. They accept stress as a challenge. They genuinely believe that the struggle is refining them. And Crum's research found that people with this positive mindset are less depressed, more satisfied with their lives, they have more energy, and remarkably, they actually have fewer health problems.
Okay, just to play devil's advocate here for the cynics listening, is it possible that the people who have easier stress just happen to have a better mindset? Like maybe they're optimistic because their lives aren't actually that hard?
That is the very first question every scientist asks when they see this data. But Crum actually controlled for the amount of stress people were under.
Oh, she did?
Yes. So you could take two people, both going through a messy divorce while simultaneously losing their job. Exact same stress load. The one with the enhancing mindset will physiologically and psychologically fare much better than the one with a harmful mindset. It is the belief system, not the external situation, that drives the outcome.
Okay, so the mindset matters, but how malleable is it really? Because if I've spent 40 years of my life believing stress is killing me, can I actually change that deep wiring?
You can.
Yeah.
And the fascinating part is that it happens much faster than you would think. Let's look at the UBS experiment. This is one of the most compelling studies in McGonigal's book because it wasn't done in a pristine lab. It was done in the real world in an incredibly high-stakes environment.
Right. This was the banking study.
Yes. Aaliyah Crum and Peter Selody went into UBS, which is a massive global financial services company, right in the middle of the 2008 financial crisis.
Oh, wow. I remember 2008. If you were working in a major bank then, you weren't just stressed, you were facing an existential threat.
Exactly.
There were mass layoffs, the market was collapsing, there was immense public hatred of bankers. It was a complete pressure cooker.
The worst possible environment for mental health. So Crum took a group of these beleaguered employees and split them into two distinct groups. Group A watched a series of videos that just reinforced the traditional view. Stress causes illness, it kills brain cells, it destroys focus.
The standard doom and gloom lecture, basically what we hear on the evening news every day.
Right. Now, Group B watched videos that showed the upside of stress. They cited research showing how stress actually improves focus, how it strengthens emotional resilience, and how the most elite performers in the world, like Olympic athletes or Navy SEALs, actually rely on stress to function at a high level.
So one group gets the stress as a toxin message and the other gets stress as a tool.
Exactly. And the intervention was incredibly short. We were talking about a few brief videos over the course of a single week.
Just a week.
Just a week. But the results were immediate. Group B, the ones who saw the enhancing message, showed a significant shift in their baseline mindset. But more importantly than just how they felt, they reported significantly fewer physical health symptoms. Things like backaches and insomnia dropped.
Just from watching a video.
Yes. And this is the key metric for the business skeptics out there. Their actual work performance improved. Their managers rated them as more productive and more energized, despite the fact that the global market was literally collapsing around them.
That is wild. It suggests that we are just incredibly suggestible when it comes to how we interpret the signals from our own bodies.
We really are. And McGonigal distills this down into a really practical three-step process for rethinking stress that anyone listening can use right now. She calls it a mindset reset.
Okay, I want to hear this. Walk us through the 3 steps.
Step 1 is simply to acknowledge. When you feel stress, don't deny it, and don't distract yourself from it. Most of us, when we feel that tightness in our chest or that knot in our stomach, we immediately reach for our phone, or we
Right.
pour a drink, or we just completely dissociate.
Yeah, we just try to numb it out. We want it to stop.
Right. Instead of doing that, you just name it. You say to yourself, I am feeling stressed right now. My heart is beating fast. My stomach is tight. You just allow the physical data to exist without fighting it.
Okay. Step 1, name it. Don't fight it.
Step 2 is to welcome it. Recognize that this physical response is happening because something you care about is at stake. You ask yourself, why does this matter to me? Connect the physical symptom directly to the value. Like, I am stressed about this presentation because I deeply care about my professional reputation.
I see. It reassociates the pain with the underlying purpose.
Exactly. It gives the discomfort a reason. And then step 3 is utilize. This is the action step. You use the energy that the stress is providing you to take an action that is consistent with your goals.
Use the energy. That phrasing is really interesting because usually the advice is the exact opposite. We're told to calm down, take deep breaths, count to 10, try to lower your heart rate.
And that standard advice is often completely counterproductive.
Really?
Think about it. When you try to calm down during a truly high-stress moment, you are actively fighting your own biology. Your body has just dumped a bunch of high-octane fuel into your bloodstream to help you handle a challenge, and you were trying to force the engine to stall.
Wow.
It creates a secondary conflict. Now, you aren't just stressed about the presentation, you're also stressed about the fact that you're stressed.
It's like slamming on the brakes while the accelerator is floored to the mat.
That is the perfect analogy. Instead of braking, you should just steer the car. And that leads us perfectly into the biological side of things, because the biology of stress is far more complex and, frankly, far more helpful than just the basic fight-or-flight model we all learned back in high school biology.
Right, let's get into the plumbing of this because I want to push back on this biological upgrade concept for a second.
Sure. You're saying that if I'm terrified of giving a public speech and my heart is hammering against my ribs, that's actually good. Because biologically, that feels identical to when I'm about to get into a car crash. It feels like pure panic.
It feels like panic because you have been socially conditioned to label any high arousal state as panic. But physiologically, what is actually happening under the hood in those two situations can be completely distinct. We need to distinguish between what science calls a threat response and a challenge response.
Okay, break that down for me. If you put me in an MRI machine or hook me up to a heart monitor,
Yeah.
would you actually see the difference between the two?
Absolutely. It's night and day. In a threat response, think about being chased by a bear or being in genuine physical danger. Your body anticipates physical damage, so your heart rate spikes, but your blood vessels actively constrict.
They tighten up? Right, they tighten. Your body is trying to minimize potential blood loss in case you get bitten or cut. That vasoconstriction is why your blood pressure skyrockets during a panic attack. And it's why you might feel cold in your hands and feet, or feel faint. Your body is consolidating all its resources to your core. It is a purely defensive posture.
Okay, that makes sense. That explains the cold hands and that sort of sinking feeling of doom. But you're claiming there's another version of this high heart rate that doesn't do that.
Yes. The challenge response. This happens when you face a stressful situation, but your brain fundamentally believes you have the resources to handle it. Your heart rate still goes way up, sometimes even higher than it does in the threat state, but your blood vessels stay open. They dilate.
So it's literally a plumbing difference in the body.
It's a massive plumbing difference. In a challenge response, your cardiac output creates a physical state that looks remarkably similar to aerobic exercise or even intense joy. You are flooding the brain and the muscles with oxygen rather than starving them. You aren't preparing to bleed out. You're preparing to perform at your peak.
So if I'm understanding this, the pounding heart in the threat response is just trying to keep me alive, but the pounding heart in the challenge response is actively trying to help me win.
That is exactly right. And the most amazing thing about this research is that your mindset is what determines which switch gets flipped. You can consciously shift your body from a threat posture to a challenge posture.
Can you give us a concrete example of how that works in a lab setting? Because frankly, it sounds almost like magic.
Let's look at the GRE study conducted by Jeremy Jameson. The GRE, for those who don't know, is that massive standardized exam you have to take for grad school admissions. It is incredibly high stakes.
Oh yeah, absolute nightmare fuel. It's the kind of test that literally determines the trajectory of your entire future.
Right, so Jameson took a group of students who were preparing for the GRE, and he gave them a mock exam in the lab. But right before the exam started, he told one specific group something very interesting. He gave them a short script explaining that physiological arousal, nervousness, racing heart, sweaty palms, doesn't actually hurt performance. It improves it.
He told them it was a good thing.
Yes. He explicitly told them, if you feel your heart pounding during this test, that is just your body pumping more blood and oxygen to your brain to help you think faster and solve problems better.
So he didn't give them breathing exercises. He didn't tell them to relax. He just told them to interpret the stress as a power-up.
He reframed the arousal as a resource. And the results were stunning. That group, the ones who got the reframe, scored significantly higher on the actual official GRE when they took it months later.
Wait.
Mathematically, the boost they got from that simple mindset shift was equivalent to raising a math score from a 740 to a 790.
Wait, from 740 to 790?
Yeah.
That is a massive jump. In the world of elite grad school admissions, that is literally the difference between getting into Harvard and getting your application tossed in the trash.
All from a simple reframe of how they view their own racing heart. And Jameson did another study to prove this with public speaking. It's called the Trier Social Stress Test. This is basically the gold standard for inducing acute stress in a laboratory setting.
What exactly do they do to the participants?
It is brutal. They bring you into a room and tell you that you have to give an impromptu speech to a panel of expert judges.
Okay, that's bad enough.
But the judges are specifically trained to be incredibly hostile. They wear white lab coats, they frown, they cross their arms, they look bored, they sigh loudly, they roll their eyes while you're talking.
The hostile audience, that is everyone's worst nightmare.
Exactly, because it triggers our deepest evolutionary fears of social rejection. Now, the participants who were taught beforehand to view their racing heart as a resource, as energy, they actually had a significantly better cardiovascular profile during the speech.
Their blood vessels stayed open.
Yes, they exhibited the challenge response. They objectively performed better on the speech, too. But the people in the control group who were told to just ignore the stress or try to relax and take deep breaths, they did not see those benefits. Their blood vessels constricted.
Wow. So trying to relax actually made their body react more like it was under a physical threat.
Yes, because they were suppressing a biological reality. The takeaway here is absolutely vital for anyone listening. You do not need to calm down to perform well. You need to channel the arousal. As McGonigal puts it beautifully in the book, you need to turn the knot in your stomach into a bow.
I really love that image. Stop trying to furiously untie the knot and just retie it into something useful. But I have to ask, does this apply to really serious trauma? Because a math test or a speech is one thing. But what about a severe car accident or a natural disaster?
This brings us to a really counterintuitive study done at the Akron Trauma Center. They did an analysis of severe accident survivors who were brought into the emergency room.
And the assumption would be that the people who were the most hysterical, the ones with the highest heart rate, the highest stress hormones, would be the most traumatized later on, right?
That is the intuitive assumption that most doctors make. If you are freaking out the most, you're taking the most psychological damage. But the data showed the exact opposite.
Really?
The survivors who had the strongest physical stress response immediately following the event, the absolute highest levels of adrenaline and cortisol, were significantly less likely to develop PTSD months later.
Why? That makes zero sense.
It does if you start viewing the stress response as an inoculation. The body was flooding the system with exactly the right neurochemicals needed to process the traumatic event, to consolidate the memory properly, and to initiate the recovery process. The people who had a blunted response, who didn't get that massive chemical surge, they actually struggled much more with long-term recovery.
So that intense, seemingly chaotic physical reaction wasn't a symptom of them breaking. It was the actual mechanism of them healing.
Precisely. It changes the internal narrative from, I am damaged to my body fought for me.
That is a profound shift for anyone carrying trauma. Now, speaking of the body fighting for us, there is another biological element to stress that we have to talk about. I think it is the most surprising part of this whole deep dive, the social side of stress.
Yes, this completely challenges the idea that stress naturally makes us selfish or isolated. And it all hinges on a specific hormone that we usually only associate with Valentine's Day.
You are referring to oxytocin.
I am. And I know every pop psychology article out there calls it the love molecule or the cuddle hormone.
Right. It's the stuff released when you hug your kids or have sex or when a mother breastfeeds. It triggers social bonding.
It does. But that cute branding has actually obscured its most vital biological function,
Which is what?
that oxytocin is fundamentally a stress hormone.
Wait, run that by me again. It's released during stress.
Yes. Your pituitary gland pumps it out as a core part of the stress cocktail, right alongside the cortisol and the adrenaline. It is just as much a part of your stress response as your racing heart or your sweaty palms.
That seems like an evolutionary error. Why on earth would the body flood me with a chemical designed for intimacy and cuddling when I'm facing a predator or a massive deadline? Those seem like completely conflicting signals. Run for your life versus go hug someone.
They only seem conflicting if you believe that the only way to survive a threat is to fight or flee. But humans are a profoundly social species. We are pack animals. We are puny and weak on our own.
True.
So the release of oxytocin during a stress response is actually a biological nudge. It's a chemical command from your brain telling you to seek out your tribe.
So the stress itself is trying to force me to be social.
Exactly. It primes your brain to detect empathy in other people. It actively increases your willingness to trust others. It literally fine-tunes your neural networks to better understand what other people are thinking and feeling. Your biology is shouting at you, do not do this alone. And here is the absolute kicker. Oxytocin is a natural anti-inflammatory.
Wait, it heals the damage caused by the adrenaline.
Yes. There are specific receptors on your heart muscle that are highly sensitive to oxytocin. When it locks into those receptors, it helps heart cells regenerate and recover from any stress-induced damage. So reaching out to a friend when you're overwhelmed isn't just a nice emotional band-aid. It is a literal cardiovascular survival strategy.
That is incredible. So my heart is pounding from adrenaline, which might be hard on the system, but my body is simultaneously releasing oxytocin to heal the heart, provided that I actually connect with someone.
Correct. This is what researchers call the tend and befriend response.
Yeah.
It is a fully fleshed out biological alternative to fight or flight.
Where did this term even come from, tend and befriend?
It actually came from a research lab at UCLA. The researchers there noticed something funny about their own stress behaviors during crunch time in the lab. The male scientists, when they got stressed, tended to isolate, get aggressive, or withdraw into their offices.
Okay, classic fight or flight.
But the female scientists tended to react differently. When things got stressful, they would clean the lab, make coffee for everyone, and gather together to talk.
They were tending and befriending.
Right. And for a very long time, stress research was done almost exclusively on male rats because female rats had hormonal cycles that researchers thought messed up the clean data.
Oh, wow.
So fight or flight became the standard, undisputed model for everyone. But once they finally started looking at the female response, and I should note, men absolutely have this biological capacity too, they realized there is this whole other gear for handling stress built into our DNA.
But here is the trap, right? Because I know this is true for me. This is the isolation trap. When I am heavily stressed, my instinct, or maybe it's just my learned habit, is to withdraw. I want to go hide under the covers. I don't want to talk to anyone. Honestly, I feel a sense of shame that I'm even stressed in the first place.
And that is the danger zone. Stress often makes us feel exposed or inadequate, so our psychological impulse is to hide. But your biology, that surge of oxytocin, is screaming for you to connect. When you go against that biology and isolate yourself in a dark room, you lose the cardiovascular protection. You just stew in the cortisol and adrenaline without the natural release valve of human connection.
So venting to a friend about a bad day isn't just complaining, it's actual biological survival.
It is physiological regulation. Your
Yeah.
body needs it. And it works both ways, too. Caring for others is just as powerful as receiving care yourself.
There was a study about altruism in the book that proved this, right?
Yes, a major study of 1,000 adults over the age of 55. They tracked them for a period of time to see who survived, and they found that for people dealing with high stress, like financial trouble or severe family issues, their risk of death increased by 30%. That fits perfectly with the old narrative.
Right. Stress kills.
But that 30% increase in death risk completely disappeared for the people who spent a significant amount of their time caring for others.
Disappear, like it went back to zero.
Completely erased. Zero increased risk, whether it was volunteering at a local charity, helping their neighbors with chores, or babysitting their grandkids. For the helpers, high stress simply did not predict mortality.
That is incredible. Caring literally creates resilience. It acts like a shield.
It does. It transforms the physiology of stress from something that breaks your body down into something that builds social connection. It proves that we simply aren't designed to face stress alone.
Okay, so we have the mindset, we have the biology, and we have the social connection. Now I want to shift gears and talk about the long game. Because sometimes stress isn't just a brief moment of panic. Sometimes it is a prolonged crisis. It's a tragedy. It's a total collapse of your normal life.
Yes, this is where we get into the psychological concepts of growth and hardiness.
We have all heard the cliche phrase, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Is that actually scientifically true, or is it just something platonic we say to make people feel better at funerals?
It actually has deep scientific backing, but with a really major caveat. In psychology, it's called post-traumatic growth. We hear a ton about post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, but post-traumatic growth is actually a very common outcome of severe stress. People regularly report increased personal strength, a deeper spiritual connection, a much greater appreciation for everyday life, and an ability to see new possibilities they couldn't see before.
That sounds amazing, but what's the caveat you mentioned?
The caveat is that it's not automatic. You don't just go through hell and magically pop out the other side as an angel. You have to actively choose to see the growth. It is an intentional, active process of meaning-making.
There is a fascinating historical case study in the book about the breakup of Bell Telephone. This was back in the 1980s, a massive wave of corporate deregulation.
All right, Salvatore Matti's famous study. This is essentially the classic foundational study on what psychologists call hardiness. Bell Telephone was a monopoly. If you got a job there, you had a safe, secure job for life. But then suddenly, the government broke the monopoly up. Half the employees were laid off. It was absolute chaos, immense, prolonged stress for everyone involved.
And what did Matty find when he studied these people?
He observed that the employees fell into two very distinct camps over the following years. One group was absolutely decimated by the stress. Massive spikes in heart attacks, divorces, clinical depression, strokes. The stress destroyed their lives. But the other group, they didn't just survive the layoffs. They thrived. They rose to the top of the newly formed spin-off companies. Their physical health remained remarkably good, and they stayed married.
Same exact stressor, totally different outcome. What was the secret sauce for that second group?
Matty called their specific trait hardiness, and he broke it down into the 3 C's.
Okay, let's hear the 3 C's, because this feels like a survival blueprint for anyone going through a major layoff or life transition right now.
First is commitment. The hardy executives stayed deeply engaged. When things got bad, they didn't pull back or isolate. They threw themselves fully into the mess, into their families, into their remaining teams. They showed up. They refused to mentally check out.
Okay, commitment. Don't hide from the mess.
Second is control. They didn't waste energy trying to control the whole massive corporate breakup. They knew they couldn't control the government or the economy, but they focused intensely on what they could influence.
So instead of worrying about the global stock price, they worried about their own specific department.
Exactly. Their attitude was, I can't stop these mass layoffs, but I can absolutely control how I update my resume today, or how I lead my specific team through this afternoon's meeting. They completely refused to be passive victims. They just looked for the small levers they could still pull.
And the third C?
Challenge. They deliberately viewed the crisis as an opportunity to grow, rather than a catastrophe that they just had to survive. They asked themselves, what can I learn from this disaster? How can we rebuild this system better than it was before? They constantly looked for the opening.
It sounds like Maddie's definition of being good at stress isn't about being bulletproof or unaffected.
No, not at all. His definition is really beautiful. He says being good at stress isn't about bouncing back to where you were before the crisis. It's about having the courage to grow from the experience. If you just bounce back to your old self, you haven't changed. True growth means you are fundamentally different. You're stronger, you're wiser, specifically because of what happened to you.
That distinction between bouncing back and actually growing really sticks with me. I think we put a huge amount of pressure on ourselves after a trauma to just get back to normal. We just want to feel normal again. But maybe normal isn't the goal anymore.
Exactly. The goal is evolution. The goal is to allow the stress to change you into someone more capable.
So this is all incredibly inspiring, but I want to make sure we leave the listener with something incredibly practical they can do right now. If someone is listening to this deep dive and they are feeling overwhelmed right this second, maybe they're sitting in their car on the way to a job they absolutely dread, or they're dealing with a sick parent. How do we apply this? How do we actively get good at stress today?
Let's look at a few really practical tools straight from the book. We've talked about the mindset reset: acknowledge, welcome, utilize. But there is another tool that is surprisingly effective, and it's called values affirmation.
This was the writing exercise mentioned in the source material,
Right.
right? The joint Stanford and Florida State study.
Yes. Researchers took university students during winter break, which is a notorious high-stress time because final exams are coming up, and they had them do a very simple writing exercise. They asked the students to write for just 10 minutes about their core values, things like family, creativity, independence, faith, and then write about how their daily activities connected to those values.
Just 10 minutes of writing?
Just 10 minutes. And the result? Their GPAs went up significantly, and their physical health improved for months afterward compared to the control group.
Why? I mean, how does writing about creativity for 10 minutes help my math GPA? That sounds super tenuous.
It works because it restores a sense of self-integrity. When you're highly stressed, the narrative looping in your head is usually, I'm in danger, I am weak, this problem is too much for me, you feel very small. But when you actively write about your deeply held values, the narrative shifts to, I care about this, I have resources, I have a purpose bigger than this exam.
It reminds you of who you actually are outside of the specific stressor.
Exactly, it psychologically buffers you. So practically speaking for the listener, if you are dreading a really difficult meeting today, take 5 minutes beforehand. Sit down and write, I value honesty and collaboration. This meeting is an opportunity for me to practice those values. It sounds almost too simple, but it verifiably changes the biological response from a threat state to a challenge state.
That is totally doable. Next time I'm freaking out before a big recording, I'm going to stop and write down why I care about the topic. Okay, what else can we do?
Transforming anxiety into energy. We touched on this with the GRE study, but let's make it actionable for everyday life. The next time you feel that physical surge, the jitters, the racing heart, the tight chest, I want you to catch yourself trying to calm down.
Like actively stop the take a deep breath reflex?
Well, you can take the breath, but you have to change the intention behind it. Don't take a deep breath to relax. Take a deep breath to actively sense the energy that is now available to you. Feel the oxygen hitting your bloodstream. Imagine it as fuel being pumped into your engine.
I really like that. It's like checking the fuel gauge and realizing the tank is completely full.
Exactly. And then you ask yourself one simple question. What action can I take right now that aligns with my goals? Channel that jittery, nervous energy into a physical step. Make the difficult phone call. Write the first sentence of the essay. Run the first mile. Do not let the energy just sit there and spin in your chest. Use it.
That is fantastic advice. Action is the antidote to anxiety.
And finally, the last tool. Transform isolation into connection. When you are suffering or stressed, the most powerful thing you can ask yourself is, who else is struggling with this right now? Or, how can I help someone else today?
It shifts the focus off yourself.
It completely breaks the isolation cycle. If you are stressed about a massive project at work, turn to a colleague and just say, man, this project is an absolute beast, isn't it? Yeah. Just creating that shared reality releases the oxytocin. Or if you are in deep emotional pain, finding a way to help someone else who is in pain is often the fastest way to feel better yourself. It reminds your brain that you still have utility. You are not just a passive victim, you are a helper.
I think that is profound. Even when we feel totally depleted, we usually still have enough in the tank to help someone else in a small way. And that act of giving actually refills our own tank.
It's the biology of hope.
So just to recap what we've covered today, because we have covered a massive amount of ground. Stress is harmful primarily when we believe it is harmful, when we feel inadequate to handle it, and when we isolate ourselves in the dark.
Correct. But when we actively embrace it, stress enhances our performance. It drives us to connect with other people, and it acts as the primary catalyst for our personal growth.
And as Dr. McGonigal says, a meaningful life is inherently a stressful life. You simply cannot have one without the other.
That is the trade-off, and it is a trade-off that is absolutely worth making.
I want to leave everyone listening with a final provocative thought to chew on. We talked a lot about mindsets in biology today, but underneath all of this research is a concept that Dr. McGonigal touches on near the end of her work, the concept of self-trust.
Yes, this is the ultimate takeaway for me.
The goal shouldn't be to build a pristine life where you never feel stress or fear or pain. That is a total fantasy and honestly a really boring one. The true goal is to build a life where you deeply trust yourself to handle the stress that inevitably comes with pursuing what matters.
If you really trusted yourself to handle the stress, to handle the pounding heart, the sleepless nights, the total uncertainty, what would actually be possible for you?
That is the exact question I want to ask you, the listener. If you truly trusted yourself to handle the stress, what meaningful goal would you pursue today that you are currently avoiding?
That's the question that changes everything.
Think on that. Thanks for diving deep with us today. We will see you next time.